everybody doing? Well, I know there's no mic today, except me, of course, but we will certainly. Is it all right if I shut this just so I can get a little space here? Well, I certainly appreciate being here today, and we appreciate Chris. Chris is doing I'd like to start with something funny, or as Congressman Guthrie always tells me, at least I think it's funny anyway. So, but there was this gentleman that basically traveled the world, and then all of a sudden he stumbles into this cannibal bar. He thought, cannibal bar? This is ridiculous. Why would there be a cannibal bar here? So he goes in, and it's kind of like you've seen the coffee shops, you know, where they have basically written up there. They had like a missionary $10, they had teacher $20, they had construction worker $50, but right down at the bottom they had politician $125. They thought $125. My goodness, why is a politician $125? So he calls the guy over and he says, "What's the deal here? I mean, $10 and then down at the bottom $125 for a politician." Guy leans over and says, "You ever try to clean one of them things?" All right, I'm sorry. I don't know in the auditor's office if we clean any politicians, and thankfully we have no politicians here today. We have statesmen and stateswomen, so thankfully none of that. But once again, thank you for having me here. When I was first elected as state auditor, I knew that I needed to have outstanding people around me in what we call team follow the data. Because when I first arrived there, I told all our auditors, I don't want to hear that you're targeting anybody. I don't want to hear that you're giving anybody a pass. I just want you to follow the data. And that's what we do. We follow the data, we confirm the data, and we report the data. Now, since I took office, the one thing that I certainly have learned is that we have plenty to do. Just as Chris had indicated, it seems like we do such a great work that we have more and more people asking us to do more and more. Now, whether it's formal requests from state, county, or local government, or complaints or concerns that we have on our hotline, which is 1-800-KY-ALERT, or you can go to auditor.ky.gov if you have any concerns. We have very, very much to do. And with that great work also comes some important legislative changes in the last two sessions that are crucial to our purpose as an agency that shines the light on concerns in government and brings transparency to the taxpayers of Kentucky. Now, during my first legislative session as auditor, we were able to get Senate Bill 168 passed in both chambers and signed into law. Now, that bill came about after questions were raised during the prior auditor's term about whether our office had the legal ability to audit cities, and in this particular case, the city of Somerset. Now, when I became auditor, my office worked closely with Kentucky League of Cities as well as the bill sponsor, Senator Steve West, on legislation that would clearly define the state auditor's authority in conducting audits and special exams. And oddly enough, we even worked with the mayor of Somerset, who had the initial concern. Senate Bill 168 essentially codifies and clarifies the role and responsibility of the auditor's office when it comes to conducting special exams or audits in cities in the Commonwealth. Now, one of the first special exams for a city that we completed after the passage of this legislation was the special examination of the city of Irvin in Estill County, which was requested actually by the town's mayor. We had also had some anonymous tips in that regards. Now, many of those 7 findings in our exam, which was referred to the Attorney General's office, the IRS, the Kentucky Department of Revenue, dealt with internal controls and oversight. For example, we found that the city's clerk was performing financial duties with very little, if any, oversight. In one case, she had approved a raise for a city employee without the mayor's signature and had opened and closed bank accounts without review or approval from the mayor. Now, another example was the payment of bonuses to city workers, which is in violation of Section 3 of the Kentucky Constitution. And this one, in some ways, is a little bit funny. We find some funny things in audits. It was unfortunate, but funny. But when a prior audit they had had basically through a CPA, they had come in and indicated to them that this was illegal, that you couldn't pay bonuses. The city changed its methodology and began purchasing and distributing gift cards. Now, the reason I say that it's funny is because they were told not to do it, but during the course of our examination work, we discovered a check written for $1,650 in fiscal year 2014, which was after that had their other audit, which in the for line of the check indicated that it was for Christmas bonuses. So I thought that was funny. You know, if you're gonna do something against the Constitution, try not to document it. You know, at least not in that thorough detail. I'm not trying to give tips to people bypass there, but the city of Irvin also had errors on tax withholdings for federal and state taxes for employees and contractors, and failed to submit their tax payments on a timely basis and in the correct amount in the IRS and the Kentucky Department of Revenue. Now, because of that failure, the city was charged nearly $18,000 in penalties. Of course, this is a small city. That's a lot for any city, but for a small city, definitely a lot, by the IRS and the Kentucky Department of Revenue between the years 2010 and September 2015. Now, those, of course, are just a few examples of some of the things we found. And as I tell everybody, if you're having trouble sleeping at night, you can go to auditor.ky.gov and pull up any of these audits, including this one, and take a look at that as well. No, I'm just kidding. Chris is like, no, you shouldn't say that. You know, these are exciting stuff. Now, another significant piece of legislation that our office passed during really just this last session in 2017 was House Bill 189. Now, this bill will bring greater transparency and accountability to the 15 area development districts we have across Kentucky. Now, many of you may remember the special examination done by my predecessor of the Bluegrass Area Development District in Lexington. That examination, which was released in March of 2014, found that there were serious issues with management operating outside its scope and lack of proper oversight and concerns over the financial activity of the ad. Now, most recently, there were questions with the Barren River Area Development District and the decision by its former executive director to use more than $82,000 in federal and state funding that was actually designated for aging and independent living, which is kind of relevant since we're standing in the senior citizen place, as bonuses for Brad employees over a 5-year period. Now, Brad addressed those issues internally, including paying back those funds and seeking new leadership after the former executive director resigned. But again, it raised questions about increased oversight of ad districts and the need for greater transparency. Now, several groups, including my office, led by our Chief of Staff, Sarah Beth Gregory, and the leadership of the Kentucky Council of Area Development Districts and the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, worked together on the bill which sailed through the House and the Senate and was signed into law by Governor Bevin. Now, the Kentucky Chamber played a major role in supporting this legislation because of the large amount of workforce development funds that flow through the development districts and the importance of having a well-trained workforce for attracting new jobs and expanding businesses. Now, House Bill 189 will require area development districts to comply with transparency and accountability laws already in place for similar agencies like the Kentucky Association of Counties. Awarding bonuses and one salary require ads to submit financial reports to the LRC and ad boards that detail how funds are allocated and spent and the number of people that are served by the ad programs. Now, as for my office, House Bill 189 gives us the right of first refusal to conduct each of the ad's annual financial statement audits, which is the same process we use for fiscal court audits. We also will have the ability to conduct reviews of audits of ads by outside accounting firms to ensure that all 15 districts are being audited consistently and appropriately. Now, Kentucky's area development districts have and continue to serve a valuable role in the Commonwealth. House Bill 189 will guarantee that the districts are doing so in a completely transparent manner. Now, those are but two examples of changes through legislation we have pushed for and have been successful with since I took office as we continue towards our goal of exposing how lack of internal controls can lead to questions and concerns from the public. Now, I mentioned earlier about how we referred several findings from our exam of the city of Irvin to law enforcement. Our office often makes referrals of findings from both special examinations and county audits to various state and federal agencies. Those range from the FBI to the IRS to the Kentucky State Police, Attorney General's Office, and the Executive Branch Ethics Commission, just among others. Now, we have also referred findings from county audits to local county attorneys and also to local ethics boards. Now, one of those referrals resulted in a guilty plea and resignation of a former county clerk and a deputy clerk who was the clerk's sister in eastern Kentucky. And a second referral led to the indictment of a former county fire department chief for allegedly using department funds to pay for repairs on his personal vehicle based on our examination findings. Now, that individual initially pleaded not guilty at first, but has since changed his plea to guilty to one count of abuse of public trust less than $10,000. Now, in each of those special examinations conducted by my office over the past months, we have found how lack of oversight and proper controls led to questionable practices, which is, of course, a recurring issue that we see over time. Probably one of the exams that garnered the largest attention from the press and from the public was our governance audit of the University of Louisville Foundation and its relationship to U of L. First of all, we had issues gathering documents and interviewing staff for that exam, and the prior leadership of the foundation and the university. And oftentimes the information, of course, that we did receive was unclear or inconsistent. One example of this issue we encountered involves foundation vendor reports that contain discrepancies, such as missing vendors and lack of detailed information. Now, this information should not have been difficult to produce and should have been accessible to the foundation management to ensure proper oversight. And another set of vendor information that was provided to our office, a note was left attached, and this is another one of those funny things that you just kind of got to laugh at. There was a note. I'm pretty sure they didn't mean for us to have it, but there was a note attached to it on a little sticky. If any more info to add on former foundation director, we have and need to add at discretion, end quote. I don't think they meant for us to have that particular one. Now, an additional issue we discovered was the failure to include the university's chief financial officer in the meeting of the foundation's finance committee, which directly contradicted both the foundation bylaws and the CFO's contract. We found multiple issues, but perhaps the one that was probably hardest for me to understand was here was a foundation that at times was considered to be $1 billion foundation, and they did not have budget to actuals. Now, I'm basically church moderator at our church, and we do budget to actuals. You would think a foundation that large, as well as they did not provide orientation to their new board members. Also, something that is a little bit odd. Most recently, we completed our financial statement audit for the Louisville Arena Authority, which oversees KFC Yum Center in Louisville. While the audit only had one finding related to the late payments to the arena of the University of Louisville Athletics Association, we had several observations that we believe need to be brought to the arena's attention. They include the fact that a dedicated fund for maintenance and repairs of the arena, which typically is supposed to receive $3 million a year annually from the arena receipts, only had little more than $642,000 in the account after 6 years. We also found that because of the use of third-party vendors, the Arena Authority has no full-time employees monitoring the Yum Center's operation for finances. That makes it challenging for the board members to exercise oversight because they must rely on information from vendors who have an interest in maintaining their contracts. And perhaps one of the most, to me, not necessarily disturbing, but somewhat disturbing, is that we found that 75% of the Louisville Arena Authority cash flow comes from taxpayers, including the TIF, as well as money from the city of Louisville. You would think something of that broad and that big and that popular would be able to provide for itself. Just recently, the Louisville Arena Authority was able to have their bonds upgraded, so we were glad that from junk bond status, which will of course go for a long way in refinancing, providing the much needed savings they have to keep it going. Now, the first major special examination my office released was our examination of the Department of Criminal Justice training and its usage of CLEP funds, or the Kentucky controls over funds often led to expenditures without DOCJT training for the purpose of CLEP. One thing that I will just mention on that particular one that was somewhat, I guess, a little bit funny. There was a lot of stuff that was not funny, but one of the things that was funny is they were using travel vouchers to purchase office chairs. travel vouchers. They also use travel vouchers to purchase burger balls, and I just thought, well, if those had wheels, perhaps they could be used as travel, but if you're eating the bourbon balls at the same time, you could possibly be pulled over for DUI. Just a thought. But anyway, another special exam that we released was the Kentucky Horse Park. We found issues caused by a lack of internal controls and oversight. One of the items that kind of stood out to me on that particular one was that of the food service contracts that we looked at, 80% of them were not billed according to contract. Some of them were higher, some of them were lower, but they were not billed according to contract. And when our auditors actually asked, what's the difference? And they said, well, during the process, some of them didn't use it all, or some of them used more, so we adjusted according to the documentation. And they said, that's great, where's the documentation? And they said, oh, we destroyed that after we completed the events. Like so, not exactly the best way to do it. And finally, in regards to audits, we just recently completed an audit of the Jackson County Fiscal Court where there was a combined 75 findings between the fiscal year 2015 and 2016, really the most that I'd ever seen. And one of the things that was very egregious, the former treasurer, definitely former treasurer now, had written herself a $114,000 in additional checks that she was not due, or improper writing in that regards. And 60,000 of those came from federal funds, the CSEP funds, and about 54,000 of those just came from their own general fund. Now, as you may or may not know, our office does more than 600 audits per year, ranging from county government to our annual statewide single audit of Kentucky that looks at how the Commonwealth is utilizing both state and federal tax dollars. And as I mentioned earlier, many of our reoccurring issues we have seen during our special examinations are dealing with a lack of oversight and proper controls, which of course led to questionable practices by those